All right, I had to get Alcatraz into the background of this one because we're talking about lockdown cornerback play. Charvarius Ward, he's made his case for All Pro, leads the NFL with pass breakups, 16 of them this season, sole possession of that number one spot, and obviously pick number 5, a huge one against Washington. The 49ers locker room certainly thinks that Mooney Ward should be an All Pro, and now we'll see if what they compare him with for the playoffs. Now, this is an interesting opportunity for the 49ers against the Rams. Obviously, the game doesn't mean anything in terms of the standings since they've already locked up the number 1 seed. So my advice would be to throw Jason Verrett in there against the Rams and let Verrett play a full game. This is when you can determine what your playoff DB rotation is going to be. Verrett played 5 snaps against Baltimore. He didn't play against Washington because he's technically on the practice squad, and they only have 3 of these practice squad activations to use, including the playoffs. So they didn't want to use one for the Washington game. I think you can use the second one here for this game against the Rams. And then you could go into the postseason knowing exactly where you stand with Jason Verrett. They just wanted to get his feet wet against Baltimore. They wanted 4 to 8 snaps. They gave him 5. So now Jason Verrett, in a game that doesn't count toward the standings, can really delve back into things. The locker room loves this guy. I mean, you look at what he's come back from: 5 season-ending injuries, 2 Achilles tears, 2 ACL tears, tore his Achilles on the practice field last season for the 49ers. They brought him back, and before they did that, they ran the big workout for him on the field. And the reason they say a big workout for him is because about 7 49ers players showed up to watch his workout. And Kyle Shanahan said that he's never, in his years of coaching, seen players show up to watch a free agent's workout. That's how much respect Jason Verrett and his perseverance has really earned in that 49ers locker room. So he's already a benefit for this team just being in there with that locker right next to Nick Bosa's. But right now, when you look at the DB situation, Ambry Thomas is having surgery on a broken hand today. He should be back in time for the 49ers' next meaningful game. But even if he is, the 49ers and any team in the NFL can use as many bodies as possible at that cornerback position. You're not going to say no to good players. And the 49ers have had some issues this year, right? It's not the same alignment that they had at the beginning of the season with Isaiah Oliver playing the nickel. They've since taken Oliver out of the lineup. Deommodore Lenoir's playing a nickel, and Ambry Thomas comes in to the outside cornerback spot. But if Jason Verrett can give you those slot cornerback reps, and he can do it at the level that he has done in the past when he's been healthy, and that's been a Pro Bowl level, it upgrades the whole defense another step. And the defense, to me, is the biggest question mark about this 49ers team entering the postseason. This is a historically good offense. I'm talking about all the superlatives they've made. They're number 1 in the league by a wide margin, but the defense has been like number 8 this season. That includes the really bad performances when they were exhausted against Cincinnati, for example, earlier this season. But they could still take it up another notch. And even if you factor in rest, and this defense has been seismically better when it has been rested, and they're going to have that rest coming off the bye week. Even if you factor that in, I think you could still get a little tighter on the back end. I think that they've made tremendous strides this year over the course of the season under Steve Wilks, making those coverage combinations harder to decipher for opposing quarterbacks. Last game, they're running zone as they made an adjustment later on, but they made it look like man coverage. And Charvarius Ward actually said that that adjustment was huge in the game. The 49ers have given up only 3.3 points per quarter in the fourth quarter this year. So that's the lowest number in the NFL. So the adjustments have been great. Steve Wilks has learned to embrace the strengths of this defense and match it with his schematic preferences. We've seen growth on that front, the cohesion between coaching and DBs over the course of the year. The hands-on instruction that Steve Wilks has delivered over the course of this season on the practice field, something that we noticed back in training camp, it's all paying off. And I think that secondary, in spurts at least right now, is playing at the very highest level that it has under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. But you could take it up yet another level if somebody like Jason Verrett can get back to playing 80 or 90% of his former skill level at that DB position, at that nickelback spot that the 49ers have, hadn't been musical chairs, but there's definitely been some rotation through that spot this year. So use this game against the Rams if you're the 49ers to work Jason Verrett in. Give him half a game, full game, whatever you feel is appropriate given his level of cardio fitness right now, right? Because he didn't have a training camp. He was rehabbing. He obviously hasn't played more than 5 snaps this season. So the full game might be ambitious from that perspective, but I think the point remains. I think that the point is that you just want a large sample out of Jason Verrett in a game that doesn't really matter from the standings perspective, so that you can decide how to set up your rotation for the postseason. Obviously, Charvarius Ward, all-pro, should be an all-pro. He's your top cornerback. He affects how opposing offenses get after you because they're trying to avoid that side of the field. Other side of the field, Diamondo Lenore. He had an interception too against Washington. Not quite as good as Charvarius Ward, but he's a decent number 2 corner, and he's able to shift inside if you need him to do that. Then, Ambry Thomas has done a fine job this year. Hasn't been great. Gave up a touchdown the other day to Washington. But if you could stack bodies, if you could have Ambry Thomas and Jason Verrett able to give you those 3rd and 4th cornerback options so you can maximize flexibility on the back end, with the 5th option obviously being Isaiah Oliver, he can be that bigger type of body that can work against tight ends that line up as slot receivers. All of a sudden, you've got one hell of an arsenal in that defensive backfield that, to me, nothing is foolproof against injuries because injuries can come in bunches and you can end up with a Brian Allen situation on your hands really quickly. But to me, that's as good as any team has it in the NFL. If you can have 5 deep at that cornerback position with 5 bodies that you absolutely trust. So that's the way that I see it, and I think that Jason Verrett, when the 49ers saw that he was working hard this offseason, early this season, working to get back, they had always eyed him as a potential upside kind of guy, right? It was house money. They were never going to give him a big contract and say, put all their chips into that table because he's been hurt so often. But if they could get him back, if they could get him in that motivated state that they'd seen him in before, they thought that this could potentially boost them to new heights. And right now it looks like it's possible. Verrett did some time on Houston's practice squad. That's the same coaching staff that the 49ers had in the past. Houston signed off on him. Verrett was cut by Houston. He doesn't talk about that period of time. It could be that he requested his release because he wanted to be with the 49ers because they picked him up shortly thereafter. He's on the practice squad now and maybe an even bigger role coming in the playoffs. But this week is for experimentation, so look out for that with Jason Verrett. Maybe he can also become the Alcatraz corner. Talk about Charvarius Ward locking down opposing receivers. Maybe Jason Verrett has some of that in his future during the postseason for the 49ers.